Matt Roloff has been on camera for nearly 2 decades. You'd think someone that comfortable in front of a lens would be a natural. And in a lot of ways, he is. He knows the beats, he knows when to lean in, when to look down, when to let a pause do the heavy lifting. But there's a difference between being good on camera and being honest on camera. And the footage from the last several seasons of Little People, Big World makes that distinction pretty hard to ignore. I want to walk through 5 specific moments from the show where, in my read, what Matt and Caryn said and what their bodies were doing were 2 completely different things. I'm not a licensed body language expert, and I want to be upfront about that. But the research on nonverbal communication is real and well documented, and most of it comes back to the same basic principle. The conscious mind controls words, and the body often doesn't get the memo. Paul Ekman spent decades at UC San Francisco cataloging what he called micro-expressions, involuntary facial movements that flash across someone's face in under a quarter of a second before the person has time to manage them. The theory isn't fringe. It's been replicated enough that law enforcement agencies have trained people in it. What I'm going to do is apply that lens to footage that millions of people have already seen, and make the case that some of what we watched as family drama was, at minimum, a lot more calculated than it was presented. The first thing worth establishing is what Matt and Caryn looked like before any of the serious conflicts started. Go back to the early seasons and watch how Caryn moves around the farm. She's confident, easy, but she also orients herself consistently toward Matt and away from Amy in a way that reads as territorial, even when the conversation is completely neutral. Body language researchers would call this postural alignment, when 2 people are unconsciously treating each other as a unit before they've publicly acknowledged any kind of partnership. I'm not saying this proves anything on its own, but it establishes a baseline, which matters when you're trying to read the later moments correctly. Now here's where it gets interesting. Clip 1 is from one of the seasons where Amy's share of the farm sale was being discussed openly on camera. Watch Caryn's mouth when she talks about what Amy deserves from the property. There's a moment, it lasts maybe half a second, where her lips compress into a thin, horizontal line. Not a pout, not a frown, a compression. Ekman's research identifies this as one of the most reliable indicators of suppressed anger or contempt. The person doing it usually doesn't know they're doing it. What's telling here isn't just that the expression happened, it's when it happened. Caryn wasn't frustrated at that moment in the conversation. She was calm, composed, saying something measured and reasonable. And right underneath that measured delivery, that micro-expression surfaced and disappeared. My read is that the composure was intentional, and the compression was the truth slipping out. You might push back and say, that's a small thing to build a case on. Fair, but this is exactly how Ekman's work functions. A single expression doesn't prove deception, a pattern does. And the pattern across these 5 moments is what I think is worth paying attention to. Clip 2. This one is harder to explain away. There's a scene where Zach is pushing Matt on the farm price, trying to have what looks like a genuine negotiation. Watch Matt's arms. The moment Zach presses on the specific number, Matt crosses his arms. Now, crossing your arms isn't always a defensive signal. Context matters. But the sequence here is open posture, question about the price, arms cross. The timing is too clean. What makes it more significant is what Matt's face does at the same moment. His eyebrows pull slightly inward and his chin lowers. That combination is a fairly classic submission-aggression mix. He's retreating from the pressure while simultaneously signaling that the conversation is over. He doesn't say the conversation is over. He keeps talking. But the body closed the door about 30 seconds before the mouth did. Zach, for what it's worth, seems to pick up on this in real time, even if he doesn't name it. He adjusts his approach, softens slightly, tries a different angle, which tells me he felt the wall go up even if he couldn't articulate why. Clip 3 is the one that I think most people remember feeling something was off about, even if they couldn't put their finger on what. There's a moment where Caryn is present during a conversation in which Matt is putting a number on the table that, based on everything the family has said publicly, came in below what Amy expected. Watch Caryn's face at the exact moment the number is said. There's a flash. The lip corner pulls up slightly on one side. It's gone in under a second. That specific movement, a unilateral lip corner raise, is what Ekman calls duping delight. It's an involuntary expression of satisfaction that someone is getting away with something. It's not a smile. It doesn't reach the eyes, which is how you distinguish it from genuine amusement. It's localized, it's brief, and it's almost impossible to fake, which makes it significant when it appears in a context where the appropriate emotion is something like concern or neutrality. I want to be careful here because I'm making a specific claim about a specific person's inner emotional state based on a fraction of a second facial movement, and that carries obvious limitations. I could be wrong. The honest version of this argument isn't, Caryn was definitely happy about lowballing Amy. It's, that expression appeared at that moment, and the most common interpretation of that expression in that context is satisfaction at successful deception, and I think that's worth naming. Whether you agree with my reading on that one is genuinely up to you. Before we get to the biggest moment in this whole breakdown, I want to say something about what makes these observations meaningful versus what makes them cheap. There's a version of body language analysis online that's basically astrology with timestamps. Someone crosses their arms and that means they're lying. Someone looks to the left and that means they're constructing a memory rather than recalling one. Most of that is not well supported. The left eye movement theory specifically has been studied and largely debunked. The Ekman micro-expression work is more robust because it's not about isolated gestures. It's about clusters of signals, timing, and deviation from baseline behavior. What I've tried to do in describing these moments is focus on clusters and timing, not single gestures read in isolation. If you watch the footage and your reading is different from mine, I'm genuinely open to that conversation. This is the sit down with the kids about the farm. Specifically, the conversation where Matt makes it clear the farm isn't going to any of them on the terms they were hoping for. This is the clip that I keep coming back to because the staging of it, and I don't think staging is too strong a word, tells you almost as much as the micro-expressions do. Look at how the room is arranged. Matt is positioned at the head of the table, or close to it. Caryn is beside him and slightly forward. The kids are across from them. This physical setup mirrors what conflict researchers would describe as an adversarial configuration, rather than a family conversation. It's not two groups talking through something together. It looks like a presentation. And Matt's posture throughout confirms that read. His back is straight, his hands are visible and controlled. He makes eye contact in a pattern that rotates around the table rather than focusing on whoever is speaking. That kind of controlled, rotating eye contact is something people do when they're managing a room, not when they're being vulnerable with their family. The eye contact avoidance happens not during the hard parts of the conversation, as you'd expect from someone who's genuinely conflicted and ashamed of a difficult decision, but during the moments where he's delivering the bottom line. When the emotion in the room peaks, he looks down briefly and then looks back up with what I'd call a reset expression. Neutral, measured, already moved on. That sequence suggests to me that the emotional weight of the conversation was something he had prepared to manage, rather than something he was experiencing in the moment. Caryn's body language in this clip is different from Matt's, and I think the difference is telling. She's not performing neutrality, she's performing solidarity with Matt. Her body is angled toward him, not toward the kids. When the kids push back, she doesn't respond directly. She waits, and her gaze goes to Matt first before she reacts at all. That behavioral pattern, orienting toward one person before responding to another, even when the second person is the one speaking to you, is something you'd expect from a business partner who's been briefed, not a girlfriend trying to support her partner through a hard family moment. Together, what Matt and Caryn are doing in that clip, in my opinion, is performing a family conversation while actually executing something that was decided before anyone sat down. The tells aren't dramatic, they're structural. The configuration of the space, the control of the eye contact, the orientation of Caryn's body, the reset expressions after emotional peaks. None of these things prove deception in any legal or formal sense, but they're consistent enough and consistent enough with each other that I find this was a difficult, spontaneous family conversation framing genuinely hard to accept. Clip 5 is shorter, and it might be the most subtle. It's a moment from a talking head interview, just Matt and a camera, where he's explaining his reasoning for the farm decision. At one point, he uses the word fair to describe what he's trying to do. Watch his head. As he says fair, his head does a very small but observable side tilt, a negative head shake during a positive verbal claim. In communication research, this is called a nonverbal verbal mismatch, and it's one of the higher reliability deception indicators precisely because it's so small and so automatic. The person saying fair and slightly shaking their head is not, in that fraction of a second, agreeing with themselves. This one is easy to miss. I missed it the first time I watched the clip, but once you see it, it's difficult to unsee. There's a broader argument underneath all of this that I want to make explicitly because I think it gets lost in the drama of the individual moments. The question of whether Matt and Caryn lied about specific things matters less to me, personally, than the question of what their behavior throughout this process reveals about how they understood their relationship to the family and to the audience. Because the show's premise, for 18 seasons, was that we were watching real people navigate real decisions. The emotional contract between reality television and its audience is built on that premise. When someone on camera is consciously managing their presentation rather than genuinely sharing their experience, that contract is being violated even if nothing technically false is said. And I think that's what a careful look at these 5 moments suggests. Not that Matt and Caryn are uniquely manipulative or uniquely deceptive people. Most people manage their presentation to some degree. But there's a difference between that and specifically using the camera as a tool to build a narrative while simultaneously making decisions that contradict that narrative off camera. The farm sale, the timing of the relationship going public, the framing of the negotiations with Amy and the kids, all of it was mediated through the show in a way that let them tell one story to the audience while a different thing was happening in reality. Amy, to her credit, has been pretty consistent in saying that she felt blindsided by things that it turned out Matt had been planning for longer than he let on. She doesn't always say it directly, but if you read between the lines of her public statements and her on-camera reactions, the picture she paints is of someone who trusted the framing she was being given and was repeatedly caught off guard when reality didn't match it. Her body language, by contrast, is almost the inverse of Matt's. When Amy is upset, she shows it. When she's caught off guard, you can see the recalibration happening in real time. There's no reset expression. There's no managed rotation of eye contact. She just reacts. And honestly, that's part of why her presence in the later seasons feels more trustworthy than Matt's, even when she's being less articulate. I want to close with something that I think is worth being honest about. Body language analysis, even the rigorous version, is probabilistic. It tells you that certain clusters of signals correlate with certain internal states at a rate higher than chance. It doesn't give you a window into someone's soul. My read on these 5 moments is exactly that, my read. Reasonably informed, but not certain. What I am more confident about is the structural argument, that the framing presented to viewers over multiple seasons of this show did not match what the people on screen were demonstrably doing and deciding in their actual lives, and that watching the body language footage closely is one way of seeing where that gap was largest. The footage doesn't lie, even when the people in it do. That's the thing about cameras. You can plan what you're going to say, but you can't fully plan how your face is going to move when you're saying it. Matt and Caryn had the advantage of a production team, editing, and years of experience on camera. They used all of those tools. And still, if you watch carefully, the moments where the body and the words stopped agreeing with each other are right there on tape. Did you catch any of this when the episodes originally aired? I'm genuinely curious because I think there's a real split in the audience between people who felt something was off from early on and people for whom the farm sale reveal was a genuine surprise. Neither response is wrong. Reality television is specifically designed to manage what you notice and what you don't. That's the whole craft of it. But once you know what to look for, going back through the footage is a pretty different experience than watching it the first time. If you've done that, or if you have a different take on any of these 5 moments, drop it in the comments. I read them.